host for another edition of VCTV. We're here today to continue discussions around a very ever-changing topic, and that specifically around investments and how things are changing in various industries. Today's industries that we're focusing again on and going a little bit more in depth are around marketplaces. What has changed in the way that we are looking at buying products? Where are we buying products from? How has that process changed? Food tech, the way that we buy food, the way that we're consuming food, and the way food is being made now and for the future. Travel. Most of us are probably not traveling. However, what does that look like going forward, and maybe ways that travel may shift and change? And lastly, transportation. Transportation and mobility has been one thing that has been consistently changing and evolving over the past 10, 15, 20, and plus years. And we expect that to continue going forward. But how has the pandemic and how have these recent times changed transportation for the better? And I'm joined with experts and investors from around the world who are here to share their views, what they're seeing locally, what they're seeing globally, and with their portfolio companies as well, and also to educate you how you can be successful in navigating this new world ahead of us. And before we get started introducing everybody, a quick shout out to Elena and to the entire LA Token team for putting us all together in this same Zoom room and making this episode of VCTV possible. We couldn't do it without you, and we're thankful. So without further ado, do want to jump in. Let each of our speakers get a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive right into the main event. So without further ado, Lawrence, welcome to the show. If you could, quick introduction on yourself, who you are, and kind of how you got into your respected space, and we'll go from there.
Great, thanks. Thank you for having me. I've been doing digital payments for over 30 years, and that started with Discover Card, early days of e-commerce, first generation of cryptocurrency in the late 90s. And that started me, once blockchain became prevalent, I worked on a fund for doing that. So right now, I'm super heavy focused on food tech, fintech, contactless payments, and I'll talk more about that later, and repping Seattle, as you can see from the background.
I love it. Curious to hear how food tech and fintech and blockchain all come together. I think that's going to be a fun topic to dive into. Also, for our audience, if Lawrence changes his background midway through, he's got a fantastic photography collection that we've been discussing pre-show. All right, without further ado, Basil, welcome to the show. We're proud to have you. If you could, a quick introduction, a little background. Basil, looks like we're having an internet connection. I'm going to come back. Yeah, you're breaking up. I'm going to come back to you. So we'll give it a minute, just let it come back on, and we'll come back to you. Grami, from the other side of the pond, welcome to the show. Quick introduction and a little background, please.
Yeah, Carol, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. My background is primarily in investments, so I worked in private equity for 25 years, did 60 plus direct investments with the firm I was with, and also sponsored some 250 venture and private equity funds over the piece. I left a few years ago, and I now am an investor in my own right. I also advise private companies and also some of the private equity funds that I used to work with. I've got an interest in kind of some of the marketplaces. I got an investment and sit on the board of a very small business, but quite an interesting kind of niche. And I think it's interesting some of the niches that are coming through in the marketplace side. I'm also interested in agri-food and that side of the market, so I have a decent knowledge of what's happening in that space as well. In the past, I've had a bit of experience on transport as well, but mainly on the manufacturer side.
Wow, absolutely happy to have you here. Excited again to dive into that as well. Raj, welcome to the show. Same to you. Quick introduction and a little background on yourself.
Raj or Raja?
There, Raja. Sorry, apologies.
Okay.
Apologies.
I thought someone else is sitting there. Anyway.
No, that's my fault. We all make mistakes. I'm the first one to do it today, so my apologies there, Raja.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, my name is Raja Apache, founder of a platform called Do Whistle. In one line, the world has changed. Everything is moving right now. So the Do Whistle platform will help connect needs and have spontaneously, bi-directional, even on the move. So that's a one-liner for Do Whistle. So it's a digital soliciting platform for business to business, B2C and C2C. That is the space I own. So we have recently launched the transportation vertical using a Whistle platform. That's what I'm into right now. I'm in India right now. So I'm in my hometown, very small village. So
all right, Raja, looks like we're having a connection issue. We'll come back to you. Andy, welcome to the show. Quick introduction and a little background as well.
Yeah, so can you hear me well?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, so my name is Andriy Drisvennikov. I'm a founder of Agroxy. Agroxy is a commodity marketplace. We are operational in Ukraine for now and in Africa as well. So in Tanzania. We started as a commodity marketplace, but now we are building ecosystem. We're adding like models which can supply tractors and help farmers to find inputs like seeds or fertilizers. And so the next step for us, we decided that we're gonna do free precision farming for the rest of the world and connect it with the marketplace. So in due time, I will tell you the story. Thanks a lot. And I'm based in Kiev, and sometimes in Kiev, sometimes in London. So living in
very cool. Aren't we all? In a Zoom kind of world, we're global citizens these days. Basil, welcome back. Are you with us there? I want to make sure you get a chance to finish. So
I think I am. Sorry about earlier. Everything was working fine for 8 hours today, and then just very briefly, I'm a general partner with a fund based in Dubai. Our fund is a generalist fund looking across the Middle East and Africa region, investing in growth stage technology startups. So looking at Series A and beyond. Obviously, the last year has been a mix of things. We've done FoodTech, we've done FinTech as well, so not very different to Lawrence and what he was mentioning earlier. Increasingly right now, we're focused on what the world looks like after COVID-19 and what that may shape up to in terms of future of work and health tech and so on. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, Oliver, welcome to the show. Make sure you unmute yourself before you go. Yeah, I've already made that mistake once, as I told everyone else not to do that. So welcome to the show.
Nice to meet you.
All right. Same thing, introduction, a little background on yourself, please.
Okay, great. So I'm basically an IT, but I've been a food reporter and a TV producer in the food industry. Created like a TV show that made 100 million viewers in China. And we also created like a cryptocurrency for the food industry because it's the biggest industry using cash and cards and the credit cards born in restaurant via the diners. And we're going to use our mainstream media that we're going to take global in a couple of years to promote the crypto and the wallet technology dedicated to the restaurant.
All right, I like it. Eli, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Eli, you there?
Sorry about that. I had my
No
phone
worries.
on mute, and I'll have my video on in a second.
No
Um,
worries. A quick introduction about yourself and a little background.
yeah, I want to make sure that I have my video on. So thanks for having me on the show. My name is Elijah Wadansari. I'm a managing director at Bowstead Securities. I've been in the investments business for about 26 years. For the first 14 years, I was on the investment management side. I built an investment firm. We managed quite a substantial amount of assets for ultra high net worth families, and invested in companies. Some of them are public. Proofpoint, A10 Networks, several got sold. Invested in funds like Kleiner, Sequoia, Greylock, so on and so forth. And then moved on to the sell side about a dozen years ago. So work with emerging companies, mostly founder-led, and help them with their liquidity needs, growth capital, so IPOs on NASDAQ, NYSE, M&As, capital raise, and really helping the founders achieve their capital goals and their vision. So based in San Francisco. Thank you again.
Wonderful. Happy to have you. Sergey, are you with us as well? Oh, you might be on mute. There you go. Oh, all right, Sergey, we're going to come back to you. So everybody, again, welcome to the show. We're, again, excited to have you. I think we want to jump right in and kind of get to the point here of, what has changed? What is going on with each and every one of these markets? Would love to hear your perspectives respectfully with where you focus, because each of these have dramatically changed. We've looked at how, again, marketplaces have shifted on where we buy. Esti just went public today, creating a very big new market, or marketplace, if you will. In the commerce space, when it comes to food tech, we're starting to see the rise and emergence of plant-based, not just being talked about, but now being sold in waves, along with huge partnerships globally as well. On the travel side, travel in some cases is a big question mark in every way, shape, or form. You've got travel where people are flying but not flying. You've got people renting cars but not renting cars. No one really knows what's happening with travel. Would love to get your perspective. And then transportation. Transportation is something I've been looking at for many years and have seen more conversation and changes around transportation, but where are we actually going with this? Are we looking at last mile? Are we looking at the future of something bigger? How does transportation look going forward? So Lawrence, we're going to go back in that circle. I'm going to kick off with you guys. I'll come around to make sure we get everyone's points. And if you do have anything, feel free to raise your hand to add. But Lawrence, what's happening? What is your perspective on how these areas, or specifically, have changed over the course of the past 3-6 months?
You can go back and look at history after 9/11. The travel industry obviously was significantly impacted in the United States. Other areas in the world became super cautious. And I had a friend who flew in to see me this weekend, and what we're seeing is social distancing on planes, people taking extraordinary measures, but the airlines and people are adapting, and they're looking at new measures. And you're going to see this in the same thing in so many other areas. People are adapting to contactless, adding, cleaning measures. So the recovery in the markets are really coming back slowly in a different way. I don't think it's going to look significantly different, but we are going to see, and my divergence is more of the car to go, the individual, and I think we'll see a dip in things like Uber, where people have been using those platforms and now are shifting back to somewhat of the rent to drive and a cleaner model. So it's kind of a messy answer, but I think we're going to see that as what shakes out over the next 18 to 24 months in that very specific vertical.
It's interesting you bring up contactless. I'm curious to see how much further that goes, right? So pre-pandemic, call it beginning of the year, Apple Pay was due to be about 5 to 10% of contactless transactions by, I think, 2023. Since the pandemic, I believe they've surpassed that number. And I will fact check that for everyone in the audience, but it is interesting to see the dramatic shift in consumer behaviors around contactless payments as a whole.
When we come back around, I've got a lot more to say about that, but I want to be respectful of the other.
All right, I will. Thank you, and I'll come back to you. Grami, I'm blown away at what you said that you've done in terms of the amount of investments you've made. So I feel like you've got a lot of opinions on where all this is and kind of where it's going, especially your experience on both marketplaces and food tech. Would love to hear your insights on where all this is moving.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things, one of the companies I'm invested with, it's a marketplace, but it also has an impact in the travel sector. And I think the challenge for that business obviously is that, there's more interaction, there's more direct to consumer, there's more linkage between one-on-one, I think. And we're definitely seeing this as a kind of, I think, a move of, providing a linkage between a provider and a customer on a kind of one-on-one marketplace. So I can see how that is interesting. And I mean, that specific marketplace does ski instructors in Europe. So you can book a ski instructor direct and liaise with them rather than going in a group lesson. And I think, looking forward in travel, I think one-on-one experiences maybe where we have to go for the next kind of 12 to 18 months before the world maybe drifts back into a more normal operating model. I mean, given I'm based up here in Scotland, we have a lot of whiskey and gin production. And I think it's interesting that kind of food market has become, almost solely in a couple of months moved from on-trade sort of restaurant bars to direct to consumer. And there's some really smart groups have come together up here anyway and locally who are distributing 1 hour delivery of craft beer, 1 hour delivery of whatever whiskey or gin or whatever you want. So I think people are adapting very rapidly. That's the sense I get. It's been a very quick adaptation. But I think as Lawrence was saying, I think some of these trends will filter in on a more kind of long-term basis as we've come to adjust that now.
Yeah, I saw today Amex is now giving cash rewards back for wine purchases because some of the sales on wine is down, which was kind of fascinating to see that from a credit card standpoint, trying to boost the sale of a particular product or entice people to buy. I bring that up based on the craft and the whiskey, as you mentioned before as well. Andy. Same to you. You're on mute. There you go.
Oh, it's all right. So I would speak more not about the COVID effect, but more about the climate change as well, because COVID is just something that is very rapidly onsets and hopefully will go effectively. But climate change is something which would continues, and but at the same time we see that we guess that consumption of the products will shift towards local consumption even more. So this is already a trend. It will be kind of going further. And at the same time, countries like Ukraine and large grain producers, they are discussing to imposing the restriction on exports as well. At the same time, when other countries are trying to boost to buy the agri commodities. So it leads to the unbalance in prices on the local markets compared to for instance, if you want to gauge price of Ukrainian wheat now against the Chicago, you will hardly do so. So Chicago is losing the kind of benchmark so it's lots of other benchmarks as well. So you may look at the Euronext, but at the same time, even with Euronext, it's kind of not very aligned. So we think that the local is a new global in terms of the agro-commodity production. So and each region will develop slowly or maybe or not that slowly, its own commodity indexes. and the local consumption of the food will play increasing role even in countries like Britain. Food security, so it's high on the agenda. Government want to ensure that the country has enough food for the citizens, and obviously they will try to boost the local production. For Britain, it comes along with Brexit, which takes off the subsidies for farmers. Other regions, they are not so dependent on subsidies, like Ukraine, Canada, US. We are producing lots of grain without any subsidies from government. So this grain is it's apparently it's a very last market that needs to be transferred in electronic formats, in terms of not in terms of the future sales or buys, but in terms of the spot sales. Kind of, and
yeah. So it sounds like there's some, so it sounds like there's a lot of more localization happening. When we were moving towards a very globalized world, we're now having to be a little hyper local, which we've talked about on previous episodes as well. So I'm glad you brought that up. Basil, same to you. What are you seeing from your perspective in these areas that are shifting and changing as well?
Well, first of all, I think we need to differentiate between what's an acceleration of an already existing trend. So whether you're talking about contactless or you're talking about, how e-payments and so on are getting adopted, much of that is just an acceleration of an existing trend, right? Pushed forward by regulation, by government, by consumer behaviors, by generational changes. My daughter is not going to carry cash, right? She's going to carry a phone and everything's going to be on it. And then I think the other side is things that COVID or the pandemic has actually maybe permanently changed. The one I wonder a lot about and I look at a lot is, commercial real. I'm thinking a lot about is commercial real estate, the workplace. Are people going to be, are offices still necessary, unnecessary? In what type of jobs and industries do you still need people to come together? It's funny, us as a VC fund, we're all been remote working and it's been seamless, but yet at the same time, there's a big craving for us to come back together and be able to be in the same place. So there's a little bit of an irony there where technology creates a need or maybe it's a longing for what we had. But I wonder what the future of work looks like a lot. We just made an investment in a company that does part-time work placement. And when we studied and analyzed what was happening pre and even during the COVID-19, part-time work or need for companies to hire people for half a day, 3 times a week, rather than a full-time job is definitely on the rise. And we have a strong thesis around the way work will change for many people. FinTech, again, Lawrence touched upon it already. There's a lot of, new behaviors being introduced because of COVID-19. Transportation is a different discussion. I haven't really had a time to think about it enough. And I'll be the first to admit, I'd love to hear some views on. But those are some of the things we've been thinking about, Kyle.
Yeah, and transportation is a very unique topic because some of it's local as opposed to global, right? So here in the Bay Area, we just opened up the BART Transportation Center all the way from the city down to San Jose. That now is going to change dramatically how people shift and move. And then when you bring in the equation of potentially electric vehicles and some of the other types of methods that have been teased about over the years, we very much could see something change back again on that localized level. Oliver, to you, the same thing. I mean, you're in FoodTech and a big face and big name in the space. What are you seeing shifting in not only all of these markets, but maybe even specific to food
Yeah, so
over the past 6 months?
the food industry, I'll focus on my two fields. The first one is, of course, broadcast, the historical one. Well, we see that we're going to have two very difficult years because the food industry, especially the restaurant industry, is one of the most impacted ones with the travel industry. So, of course, this business and the sponsor behind are going to be it's very, very bad year. So for them to recover and start to invest again, will take 18 months and 2 years, something like that. But I think on the blockchain side, I mean, for the fintech, we have a very, very big opportunity because, well, the restaurant industry, they will make 5% margin. You know, that's a very, very tough industry. But today you can count that in like NATO countries, the one I know the most, they will have something like between 5 to 10% in cash payment, which is like crucial for them. But this will tend to disappear very, very, very fast because of the COVID, because we're going to have to pay less and you have even more card than before for security purposes. So this is where cryptocurrency that is basically digital cash is going to replace cash in restaurant is going to be much more crucial, much more fast. So in fact, what happened with the COVID, it got accelerated the calendar very, very, very fast. You know, it's a very big change.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And, you know, bringing up the contactless, and Lawrence is chomping at the bit because I know he wants to talk about it. So we're going to be coming back to it because that has dramatically changed. I mean, fintech myself has been studying a lot of this as well, and curious to hear all of your views on how that has shifted. Eli, to you, I mean, all of what we've heard thus far has been a big push towards digitization, right? Live or die in terms of digitization. But what are you seeing shift and change around these areas from your perspective?
Yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity. You know, Kyle, the most important thing is it's not only the digitization, of course, which we're looking at. I think it's really the overall thought process that has shifted. So I'll give you an example. In terms of the, you know, let's look at the transportation side of it, right? So transportation, of course, you know, we know what is happening in terms of you know, airplanes not having, or maybe sometimes trying to have the middle seat empty. That's something we read about in, you know, in newspapers. But in reality, it's a pretty big shift. So one of our companies, ePallet, actually is the Uber for food and grocery supply chain. And what we are learning is that the larger restaurants are not buying the way they were buying before, right? The new verticals are emerging. Food banks, schools are getting completely disrupted, prison system. So the whole notion of how do you buy LTL, less than truckload, is emerging because they have the need to buy it from the manufacturer. So there are different services like e-pallets that are emerging. Then you have the intelligent supply chain side, where you cannot have the inefficiencies that you had before. So you have companies like AnyTrack that are really streamlining the actual transportation and supply chain. In terms of the consumption, we're seeing a dramatic rise in the cannabis. We have a couple of companies in the cannabis space, and you know they're just doing extremely well, both on the plant touching and non-plant touching side. And then overall, you know, the other part is the telecom side. You know, we are doing work from home, especially in the market worldwide, where we're looking at the telecom. You know, we're seeing a lot of the 5G deployment. We're seeing the new tower build out. And that is something that is going to continue, because if we have to work the way we're working, we need to have very solid broadband infrastructure. So we're seeing that. And then the other part that's coming in is really the bioinformatics and the biometrics. So we are used to getting our PIN code, right? Then we have, you know, our fingerprints, the voice, which is touchless. is getting a lot of traction. We have companies in there as well. So we're really looking at a fundamental shift of a contactless society, but at a much more of a deeper level. And we're seeing a new set of consumers emerging and seeing the old system just getting really dismantled. So it's actually, quite honestly, quite exciting in terms of new opportunities.
I would have to agree. I mean, we've been talking about these types of things for many years, and we've all been, teasing out some of these products, and finally they're here with a arguably a very good use case going forward, right? The right use case in that sense. And Najjar, welcome to the show, and I want to get to you as well. So, in terms of what's happening in the world, how are you seeing from your perspective things change around food tech, marketplaces, and travel and transportation, both locally and then on a global perspective?
Yeah, so look, a little bit of context. I mean, unlike I guess most of everyone else here, we make investments in East and West Africa in businesses whose engine of growth is the low-income mass market. And the big thing, I think, the overriding thing that's happened that we're seeing is a lot of the fragility in the system that we've basically been able to paper over the last many years has suddenly come to the fore. So here, for example, the incredible number of intermediaries between food from a smallholder farm to the plate in our region, that creates all sorts of risk, cash flow risk, hygiene risk, etc. And there's just been an explosion of tech providers, software solutions who are trying to bring transparency to that and disintermediate that entire chain. Honestly, now in retrospect, over-reliance on export markets for food produce. Kenya exports all its good stuff. Ghana exports all its good stuff. That's obviously come crashing to a halt with enormous social and economic consequences. And so we're seeing a lot more efforts to build brands locally, to sell direct to local consumers. Similarly, there was a lazy belief that you could build a big business by serving B2B into restaurants, into hotels, and so on. And of course, at the end, the collapse of the hospitality sector in this region means that all those businesses have fallen away. And so people are now building really great tech solutions to ERP solutions, point of sale systems, but designed for the ultra local market. So a fish vendor who lives in a slum who sells 20 pieces of fish a day now suddenly has access to a point of sale system to enable her to sell, but more importantly, to enable that entirely complex value chain upstream of her to have visibility of how much fish she's selling so they can slick up that entire supply chain. So we're seeing a lot of technological solutions coming in to really smooth out that incredibly complex value chain and to reduce reliance on export markets and large consumers.
It's a very interesting example, because now what you're implying there is that not just the hyper localization, but also it could bring a dramatic rise or decrease in marketplace goods. So for instance, the fish example could sell 20 and now could sell 25 because they're seeing such a demand, or it could sell 15 and introduce a new product. So the way that things have worked on a very big scale massively now can come to a hyper local side as well, which I think is pretty fascinating in addition. Raja, are you back with us?
Yes, Kelly. Yeah. Sorry
Awesome.
for that.
No. Hey, look, it's the Zoom world we all live in. It all happens. No stress. But same question to you. So in terms of what's happening in these markets and in these industries we've spoken about, what are you seeing from your perspective, locally in India, but then globally as well around, marketplaces, food, travel, transportation?
Sure. So especially during the lockdown period I've been experiencing in India, it's totally, we are heading into the new world. So we never follow social distancing, and we completely contact-full transactions happen here. So unlike other countries like Amazon Go, here the person will be standing and he will be handing over all the product. When you go to a local kirana shop, so you will no option to pick yourself. No, he has to give it to you. So it's all has to change. So now people are literally worried, even though the lockdown has been eased out here, and people are scared to go out. So a lot of people were crying for the store to be open. Now they are saying that, I know, even if I open, no crowd. So they have no idea how to manage. And India is not completely technology-driven country yet. But I see a lot of shift. So people have to start using the digital platforms. So what I see, the value, the hyper-local delivery system is picking up really well here because people wanted to stay home. And the movie theater, the shopping mall, and I don't think people are having enough confidence like before. So there is a huge space out there. The people will transform their home as a movie theater because Amazon, Netflix, all got a big scope here nowadays. We used to spend $1,000. I'm giving you an example, to watch a movie with family, one movie, but for the $1,000, you get unlimited movies at home for complete year from Amazon. So now I started feeling that the home construction people, we used to call 3 BH home and 2 BH home. Now I definitely start seeing one bedroom will be converted as a movie theater because people wanted to have an experience out there. Mm-hmm. So I hope, and logistics will be more because people wanted to buy online.
Yeah, it's interesting. The at-home movie theater experience, I feel like here, at least in the States, has been around the concept for some time, and it seems to ebb and flows. But the one thing you did mention that has not been mentioned, I will say, and Elena can fact check me, but has not been mentioned on any show talking about this pandemic and the changes that have happened, was Amazon Go. So Amazon Go, for those who don't know in the audience, was this concept that started to grow. And Lawrence, I'm teeing you up, so get ready. It was this concept that was put in place by Amazon. And the idea that it was a completely touchless, contactless store. You walk in, you pick up what you want, you walk out. It felt like you were robbing a store, but nonetheless, you still got charged what you picked up.
Right.
And during this time, and as Raja mentioned, Amazon Go, that model was there, but it's actually kind of disappeared. And here in the Bay Area, they're all closed. This is a time, if anything, where you would expect these stores to be opened. But now it appears this model may not exist going forward. So Lawrence, to you, what does this look like? Do you see this world of contactless changing from that Amazon Go? Do you see something more as the future of contactless emerges? And I will let you go.
All right. So I see it as an accelerator. I think there are fewer that are open while they're rethinking their strategy. The market is only down about 40 to 60%, which is huge, right? So only sounds bad. But what people want is to be able to bring in, they don't want to touch cash, and I'll try not to touch on too many subjects. Center for Disease Control here in the US has said paper money in other countries is no longer paper, but still it is a major carrier for disease. So people are being asked to use credit cards, contactless mediums. If you go to Shenzhen in China, their automated kiosk market, and there are plenty here in the US, are prevalent. You can't pay in cash. You can't go to street vendors and pay them in cash. You're either scanning a QR code with WeChat, which is the prevalent way of communicating in massive parts of Asia, especially China. Tencent has their own version. There's another whose name escapes me now. So we're looking at, and I'm working very closely and heavily with contactless payments. You mentioned Apple Pay before. Apple, for over a decade through the Apple Store, has held over 800 million credit cards. So they have a massive amount of information and connections to you. They can move that to contactless through your mobile phone by scanning QR codes. And most of these places that I'm talking about in China, and there are plenty of markets, there are over 11,000 markets here in the US alone that have contactless through the next several generations of vending machines. So there's that. And Oliver talked about blockchain and cryptocurrency. I've been all in for a very long time. Once this pandemic has touched on the need not to connect, by handing someone something, once we get a very good wallet for the crypto world, and I've been banging this drum for a while, so if you know one, let me know, you will have a liquid circulating economy for crypto, for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the many altcoins that are out there that will drive the adoption. That's what it's been waiting for. So the unfortunate thing that's happened has driven the consequence of contactless stores with less workers, and a lot of it is a process and culturally oriented. The Chinese in certain areas have adopted it. Americans have adopted it in their style, and you will see how it gets adopted in other countries. And I've spent a lot of years in India. I think we'll see it happen, but it's a very high touch, high service country. So the way that it happens and the types of service that you get from people are going to change, but you'll see everybody shifting to a mobile phone, some device, not touching things. And it will also change the entire food chain within grocers. I could go on for about an hour decomposing this. Maybe we can talk and go round table, because it also changes supply chain, and blockchain helps you with supply chain. Last point I'll make there is people are super concerned about sourcing, and a couple of my early investments have been using the blockchain for the language of quality and traceability, which in many industries, especially niche ones, even things like coffee and chocolate, which are sold worldwide, don't exist, or they exist only in niche forms. So people want to know where it's sourced, who touched it, how many times was it touched before that cup was poured for me, either by a human or a very sophisticated coffee vending machine. So
let me ask you something. I want to ask you something real quick. Do people really care? And the reason I want to ask that, and that's a question to everybody, is we as consumers, or excuse me, as investors and technologists, we say that the consumer wants to know where something has been or hasn't been, or been touched, not been touched. Do consumers really want to? When you go to the grocery store, are you really wanting to know that this orange came from this location and was tracked all the way through, and you're going to look at that? Or is that just what we want as technologists? We want to be able to see that information. Because I think this plays into a consequence of contactless payments, or just the idea of contactless, is that there's an abundance of information, and it's almost information overload to the everyday consumer versus us as technologists.
I'll end with this. Millennials are paying 20 cents more per cup of coffee because they can trace that it was ethically sourced. And now that we have pandemic concerns, you will see that spread into much broader audiences.
All right. Garami, I want to come to you. So food and fintech. You've kind of sat at these intersections. Basil, I'm going to come to you. Andy, I saw you raise your hand as well. All three of you guys, I would love to get your opinions and thoughts off of what Lauren said. Is, where does this all go from here? What is the benefits? What are the consequences that further get shaped as we move into these worlds that start to merge between fintech and food?
I think just maybe briefly from me, I think one of the big challenges that we face, and we've had a food chain that's gone global, and I can go to my supermarket and pretty much get any fruit at any time of year that I really want. So I think there's two impacts of localization. One is that what's the price offset that, so how much more am I going to have to pay, or less am I going to have to pay if I do that locally? What's the trade-off there? And I think, is there a willingness for me to accept, less choice in that? And I think, if there's, the companies that are out there addressing those kind of issues, I think, and really saying, okay, we can provide, great tracing, tracking, ethical, local, but we can do it at a lower price point than you could if you were doing it through a kind of global supply chain. And I think that's when it starts to become very, very relevant. And I think that one of the other challenges I see, certainly from the investment world, is that people today are struggling just to see where some of these changes are coming to. So a lot of investors are sitting on their hands at this point in time and waiting to see almost what the impact is of the last 6 months. Some are being pretty forward, but there's others who are struggling, and there's investment committees who are really just saying, well, we'll only do healthcare and software companies today in specific sectors, and not really looking at some of these bigger issues. So I think it's there's some interesting I think dynamics coming down the line.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fallout, right? What has just happened in the last 6 months? There's an after effect to that. We've spoken a lot about on other shows that, again, this digitization, this process of digitization, and amount of data that we've collected around the world in such a short period, and how that data can be used or not to redefine and reshift markets going forward as well. That's going to be fascinating from a food and from a marketplace standpoint as well. And Basil, I mean, you mentioned it, food and fintech. You sit at these intersections on the growth stage. What are you seeing that's really pushing or not pushing these things forward?
It's a tricky question. I guess, from the experience we've seen, interestingly, is we have an investment in a company called Lunchon, which is actually just rebranded to Munchon, because they don't do lunch anymore. They do everything else, dinner and groceries and everything else they figured out during the pandemic. But putting that aside, it's a subscription model. And we were very skeptical when we were doing due diligence on this company about, would people pay for subscription food? Ultimately, you get some choice, but you're being navigated towards hugely efficient meals, if you like, right? Restaurants with overcapacities, or restaurants with capacities that are not being underutilized. Consumers who are on a budget and who want to manage their wallet, if you like. And I guess we saw a huge uptake of this model before COVID, and even greater one after, albeit that it's no longer at the office, it's at home, which is the shift between Lunchon and Munchon, if you like. And then, post-COVID, or we're not even post-COVID yet, we're already starting to see new patterns emerging in the data of the company about consumers' behavior and consciousness. So I guess partial answer to your question would be that, yes, given the right incentives to users or consumers, fintech can provide an attractive model for how you consume food. I'm not saying this is going to be broad-based, but it's definitely something that I think will continue to trend, at least according to the data we're seeing. And we're just, to put things into magnitude, we're talking about, over 10,000 orders a day coming out of this business today and growing. So it's not inconsequential figures, if you want. These are now, pretty substantial cohorts that are being built up.
Yeah, wow. And now Rajaj, I want to come to you as well. So in Africa, I mean, Africa has been, I would argue, probably the furthest ahead next to Asia around contactless payments. How are you seeing things kind of shift or maybe accelerate further around the idea of contactless, either in marketplaces or just in general in Africa?
Yeah, contactless in parts of the continent is well ahead. So M-Pesa in Kenya, Tigo Pay, Tigo Cash, etc. The thing that this seems to have driven or is accelerating is not so much the contactless payments, but the use of the data to provide microcredit to the producers of the food. So at the opposite end of the value chain from Basil's description, where you have thousands of producers who are producing green beans, etc., of the fruit that Graham's eating and so on. They're historically, you get a broker who comes around and says, how many mangoes have you got? Takes all the mangoes and goes, and that's it. And by digitizing the chain, which is accelerating now, the buyers can now keep track of how much each producer is producing and start providing credit to those farmers. So it's actually deepening the integration of digital money into the value chain beyond just payments and into credit. And there's an increasing evidence of insurtech and savings as well, pension savings. So there's a lot of deepening there.
Andy, from your perspective, kind of furthering on that, you focus a lot on the marketplace side. Are you starting to see more data being used and leveraged around the growth and maybe evolution of marketplaces now?
Yeah, so just it's apparently generally accepted that data is a new gold. And but it's not like gold, because it's very perishable good. So 3 days on, data may cost nothing already, or then when you build up the large volumes of data, then it can cost something again. So in terms of so we are focusing all our extra services on collecting data all the time. So mainly from three sources, either from farmers themselves or from IoT, Internet of Things, like weather stations or tractors themselves, or from marketing activity. Yeah, but what I really want to touch on is we discussed if the consumer wants to pay extra for the traceability of the product. So here, in our view, you have to split up markets completely in. We split it in 3 sections. You may do even further. So like England, people willing to pay for extra if they know the origins of the good. Fair trade proved it. So countries that are just speaking, like Ukraine, I know from experience, majority people will not pay, and even not that interested in tracking. In terms of the Africa, so this is not a matter for them of paying extra for the tracking. It's a matter of providing data for the people from the England may track the product. So if they will provide this data, someone will pay extra in richer country for their product. So therefore, it's like kind of, it works like that for us. But we are focused on the collecting data, as I said, and to increasing yields for us. It's maybe not that trendy thing as one may say when you supply the microfinances, because it's quick money and you can make a lot. But we are focusing on the sustainable development goals, and we want to ensure that food there are enough food for us, in future. And for doing so, we have to increase efficiency of agriculture in Africa, because Africa is huge. So you can, kind of, it's a map of the world is misrepresent the size of Africa, because you could feed there China, US, and Russia apparently as well. So it's really huge, and it can provide you can grow like corn there twice a year, and not everywhere pretty much, but so large potential, but completely not used by the locals.
Yeah, I see everyone shaking their head, and Niraj, let me just go ahead and unmute yourself. I'll come to you next. I see everyone shaking their head, and Niraj, I want to get to you, and then Eli, I saw you have a moment, and Oliver, don't worry, I'm coming back to you too. So go ahead, Niraj.
Just one other thought on this question of, do consumers care? The other question is, do regulators care? So one of the things that really drives the export market for across across Africa for food is whether the food can pass the regulatory tests of the EU, the US, etc. Historically, these have been focused on pesticide use, fungicide use, etc. And the regulators have required certain levels of traceability to ensure that is maintained. I would not be surprised if in the next 6 months, some sort of disease tracking traceability is integrated into that. So even if the consumer is not willing to pay extra, or some of the consumers not willing to pay extra, some do, some may not, the regulator may actually block you off from the market if you're not able to demonstrate the traceability. And that's something people are starting to work on extensively now.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Eli, I know you had something to add.
Yeah, no, appreciate that, Kyle. I think the traceability is actually important. We see that in the marketplace quite a bit, but at a fundamental level, from an investor perspective, the blockchain is really not the selling point. You know, we're U.S. regulated broker dealer. We're SEC registered. You know, we're at the front line in terms of connecting with the institutional investors. And the blockchain, what it was back in 2018, is not the selling point. The point is really, how does it translate into the top line or bottom line? So the model that we're seeing working is that you have the blockchain component, but then you have a trust element on top of it, sort of a trust-based organization saying, we do the checking, we have the blockchain, you trust us. Because how many times have we gone to Whole Foods, Sprouts, or anywhere else, and we pulled out our phone and looked at a product and seeing if the supply chain was actually accurate, right? I have never done it, right? The point is that, you know, certain brands like Verizon, certain other brands that actually have the reputation. And when you know that they have the reputation, you basically buy it on the reputation side. So it's a trust base, and that the trust could be partially based on the blockchain and really the tracking component. So somebody is doing it, not at the consumer level. So it's more of a trust that is based on the blockchain and really the traceability versus leaving it at with the consumer.
Yeah, and Oliver, on that, what is and you're on mute, just so you know. So what is the future of food? You know, that's one area we haven't. Yeah, you got so excited. This is your moment, my friend.
Yeah,
what is the
but
future
like I
of
heard
food?
like a lot of really interesting thoughts, and I want to move on it. But what I would say about the data, the original questions, the thing that the consumer wants to know, we see two very specific trends. The first one is that they want to see the carbon cost. They want to see how far the product is coming from. Is it on season or not? And the more and more people want to respect the season, and they don't want, you know, their product to travel the whole earth and do it unfairly sometimes, you know, for specific product. That's very right. But the second thing, the second very big movement, because there's a very big pressure from the vegan world, we can see it. It starts to be nearly aggressive sometimes. They are worried about the well-being of the animals. So what we imagine today, maybe we'll do it, maybe not, maybe some others, I hope it will happen, would be a label where you can see, you know, real life camera with the farms, and you will see the condition of how the things are made, because exactly with eggs, you want to know that the poultry didn't spend its entire life in a cage, and they can run outside and be happy, because of course they all die and we need to eat, but you want to see that they had a great life and it makes a better meat. So these are the two key points about food labeling. And on the other hand, about, you know, payment methods, I'm totally following on Lawrence. If we have to make a parallel between what happened in the internet a few decades ago and what's happening now in blockchain, is that Bitcoin created like kind of the W3C, like the protocol to transfer, you know, value, when the W3C was there to transfer information. Then with Ethereum, you had kind of a common language with like HTML and all other that could, you know, allow any programmer to make it easy, but you don't have the wallet yet. You don't have an easy to use way of payment, intuitive. And this is what really we're focusing on. So I'm not here, you know, to sell my stuff, but the good thing is that in Belgium, because it's the only country where Visa and MasterCard are not number one, we have another protocol of payment. And those wallets already appeared, you know, very, very user-friendly, and they could take over the market within a couple of years. And I think it's going to be even faster because of the COVID.
It's an interesting point, and looking further to opening that up. Gentlemen, we are coming to the top of the hour, so I do want to get our big lightning round question in so that everyone in the audience has the chance to walk away with one more big additional topic, and that is, how has investing changed? How have you as investors changed your process, your thinking around investing in these areas over the last 6 months and looking ahead, so they can ready themselves, or those investors that are listening can also prepare and kind of open up that Pandora box a little differently. So I'll go around the circle. So Lawrence, we're going to start with you up in the top corner. How has the investment process changed, and how do you see that looking forward as you start to make investments in these areas or continue making investments in these areas?
So three things have happened. One, all of the funds that have existing startups have a lot of hungry children to keep feeding. So ring fence those, open a new fund, work with the allocators to build out funds that are sort of virgin for the new things, double down on fintech, digital payments, contactless, digital identity, so that entire supply chain of creating the next generation of digital wallet.
I love it. Basil.
I think the criteria has temporarily shifted. I think in terms of the burn, the amount of money capital the companies can raise, valuations, the requirements for what is successful in terms of management, in terms of addressable markets, product market fit, I think the criteria has changed. But I do think a lot of it is temporary. I do think investors have a short-term memory, and I do think that a lot of it will go back to whatever it was before. But in specific sectors, like how we work or how we, deal with the healthcare system in general, especially when it comes to the parts of the population that are not insured, and how we interact with each other, some of those will change for sure. And I think those create opportunities that are vast. I don't think it's all about just technology. I think a lot of it's also about the service and the service that the end user gets. And in those gaps between the two, or in the intersection of the two, I think some great new companies may exist already, but definitely will be born out of it.
Agreed, and curious to see how that starts to unfold. Raja, same question to you. How has the investment process changed? How are you looking at investments differently or making investments differently now?
Well, as usual, when it comes to an investment, I don't think the process has changed, because the mindset, there are always the optimistic people, the conservative people. They look for all the proof before investing. The big other sides are high risk takers and reward winners. So reward winners are eagerly waiting for this kind of opportunity, because it never happened in the history. And look at the technology stocks in NASDAQ. There are several companies were gone up, and so meaning it's the right time for the high risk takers to invest. Me focusing on AI based, the technology is still the better bet.
Mm-hmm.
So looking for all AI based companies to invest on. So sit on cash and try to catch the AI based company, and you'll be all right.
All right, AI being thrown in at the last minute. I love it. I love it. Lawrence is shaking his head over there as well. Eli, same question to you. How have things changed on the investment side? What are you doing differently?
Yeah, I think the investment side is much more focused on how does it really behave in this COVID and post-COVID-19 world. We don't believe that this is going to change in the next 12 to 18 months. Because we deal quite a bit with the public or soon to be public market, our time horizon is actually not that long. It's about 12 to 24 months. That's what we look for. We believe this is the new normal, and we believe the investments that we're making or the companies we're actually backing as investment bankers tend to have an appeal in this market. So healthcare is a very big component of our portfolio. Therapeutics is just huge. We're seeing a lot of demand from the investors for the therapeutic side. We're seeing in terms of the fintech, we just brought in a company that we're going to be investing in and also bringing it to market. It's a publicly traded company, so I can't say the name. But basically what they're doing is they're allowing the different coin holders, digital coins, to be able to seamlessly go to seamlessly use them at Whole Foods and any merchant. They're connected with 58,000 merchant platforms. So basically, the whole notion is, from our perspective, we look for adaptability, usability, and really acceptance in this COVID-19 world and post COVID-19.
I love it. And Andy, quickly, same for you. What has changed on your side of investments?
Yeah, so just we're investing only in our own venture, so to say. And however, from our view, people are become more concerned with basic needs of food security, for instance. Yeah. So suddenly people are starting to be interested in this stuff. For that moment, for 10 years on, it was less interest, to be perfectly honest. So now technology apparently is about ready to deliver what other people are looking. So, but before then, there was no demand for that. So now we see it's rising.
Oliver, same to you. What has changed?
Well, something really big, I think. Because I think when you see the crypto economic model, I mean, ICOs and what's gonna come after, there's a tremendous change in the history of capitalism, because since day one, when an investor was, putting money in a company, he was a shareholder. And because he was a shareholder, he was expecting some dividend, and to make the more money, he wanted to maximize profit. But when you invest in coins, you're not a shareholder. Whether you make profit or not doesn't change anything. You can put the coin in a foundation and you don't need to maximize profit. And the thing is that we're in a world where we are looking to maximize profit we're in a finite world, which is crazy. Any monkey could understand it will never work forever. But in the cryptocurrency, economic model, you don't need to maximize profit anymore. So for us, that's the biggest change that it will bring to capitalism. This is where capitalism will become 2.0, because you don't need to maximize profit anymore. And it can even go against the interest, because if you try to make money on top of it, you will be less competitive. You need the technology to spread, indeed. You don't need to make profit. And if you make profit and you're in a foundation like we will do, you can share it with people in needs. What you need is people to use the technology, not make money. That's the biggest change.
Now, Raj, same question to you.
Yeah. So two biggest things. One is we live in we operate in a very capital constrained world. So the first big one is a very rapid mindset shift away from, if you see a good company, grab as much of it as you can and get it to grow as fast as you can, to, if you see a good company, let's get 2 or 3 other really good investors in alongside you and make sure you grow sustainably, and just be a bit more patient. So that's the one big shift that's happened in the last few months. The second one is that we're now seeing, and this is almost only a short-term thing, we're seeing this as a really great data point for assessing the quality of our entrepreneurs. How an entrepreneur reacted defensively to the crisis and then shifted to offensive. So cut costs, trim where you can, and then start looking for opportunities in this crisis. That's a big thing that we're starting to use to assess entrepreneurs.
That's a great data point. I think that's something that all investors talk about, but rarely, I don't, again, think that it's actually been mentioned on this show here at VCTV. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a very good point. Karami, same to you.
Just briefly, I think I'll finish on just a couple of a macro and a micro point. I think from an investor's perspective, if you look at the kind of mid to large investors today, I mean, they're looking at this as once in a generational opportunity, just as we had back in 2009, really. So I think the smart contrarian investors will deploy capital into, attractive opportunities in what, as I said, was quite a constrained capital market. So private equity, venture capital tends to do well in those kind of environments. So I think you'll see a lot of money flowing from the smarter people there. And on a micro basis, I mean, one small business that I'm invested in is raising at the moment. It's a marketplace, operates in the travel sector, but we've seen really good interest from both existing investors and new investors, because I think they recognize that any business that can offer, strong service to both customers and the suppliers into that, and can offer it at a price point that means it's attractive, will continue to be, meaningful for investors and shareholders. So, I think there's a huge amount of challenges going forward, certainly in the travel sector, but, I'm hopeful that, the smart money will continue to flow into those areas.
And Rami, closing thoughts, and where can everyone find you?
Oh, me? Closing part?
Oh, yeah. Same to you.
Yeah.
So any closing thoughts that you have, and then where can everyone find you online as well?
In terms of sort of final thoughts, I'm just really impressed actually with everybody on the call today. Just some really interesting approaches and strategies and technologies that seem to be, very much of the moment, and a lot of thoughtful investors and businesses out there. So I'm super encouraged with that. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Graham Gunn.
Wonderful. Andy, same to you. Quick closing thoughts, and where can everyone find you?
Yeah, I thought just to write it down here in chat, but thank you very much to everyone. So just once again, so we call it agroxy, and we think it's a global, local, it's a new global. So, and focusing more on how to produce rather than how to distribute. And pretty much this is it. And I will write down, the contacts in the general chat and join
Perfect.
Chat. Thanks.
Wonderful. Eli.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Cal, for the opportunity. The closing thoughts are pretty simple. I think we have to look at the public markets, be it the NASDAQ, NYSE, OTCQB, QX, LSE. We are registered broker dealers as well as investors. And we believe that the market, the public market, are the prime place for companies that have achieved a certain level of proof in their business, and let the shareholder wealth be created at the public level. So, we are bringing companies to market in the public market much earlier than the traditional large bulge bracket investment bankers do. And what it does is it really allows the wealth building, like I said, at the Main Street level. So, Nike went public at a $50 million market cap versus Facebook at a $50 billion. We have the ability to do so. And I really advise potential founders, existing founders, and management to really explore the public route. And of course, in addition to the investments from the private market, but really a combination of it is really where we're seeing a lot of traction, even from the private equity investors. The liquidity event is much shorter because typically it's about 7 to 8 years, and we can cut that down to 12 to 18 months in most cases, but every case is different. So again, access the public market, and I'm at LEELI at Bowstead 1828, or LinkedIn, just Eli Jawad Ansari, and I look forward to hearing from the founders and the management.
Raja, closing thoughts, and where can everyone find you? Quick closing thoughts. We're just a little over.
Definitely. This is like once in a while. I don't think everybody will get the chance to experience this kind of pandemic situation. From my perspective, world is not going to end. So we continue to pass on these things, and keep our eyes focused and find an investment opportunity and do whatever you do. I think the world is not going to end. That's a great opportunity we are experiencing, good or bad. It's a great chance for us to witnessing this crisis. And let's move on.
And where can everyone find you? What's your website?
dowhistle.com. www.dowhistle.com.
Thank you, Oliver.
Great. So thank you very much all for this, wonderful meeting, your attention, all these ideas. It's very exciting to see, so much motivation about, the crypto industry, finance. We do believe that the crypto economic model can solve capitalism. We also believe that, it's gonna spread worldwide and, mainstream in the food industry like it did with a credit card. Right now, we are focusing on the US to see how they're gonna evolve with it, because China is taking the lead and they will have to react at some point. And yeah, for those of you who are interested in what we do, we can just go to tablecoin.org to see, the presentation of the Tablecoin Foundation, and you will get some links about what we did in broadcast these last 15 years.
Wonderful. Lawrence, you're on mute.
You can find me, let's see if it comes out. There you go. LinkedIn, Lawrence Lerner, or WeChat or Telegram, Rev Innovator. I'll disagree slightly with Eli. Don't look at the big markets, look at venture markets, TSX, LTSC. I think there's a new generation of market that's coming out. Great to explore. Look forward to many great conversations.
Wonderful. Love the business card. Basil.
I'm Basil at global.vc and also on LinkedIn. It's good to see the diversity of thoughts. Definitely it shows that there's a big world out there and still lots of opinions. But I think the next period is going to be tough on everybody, but hopefully not for too long. That's my wishful thinking coming out.
Niraj, close us out.
Yeah, closing thought, just really exciting to hear so much positivity. I mean, yes, tough for the next 12, 18 months, but everybody's clearly very excited about the long term. So that's especially now when I'm surrounded by people who are stressing about all of our daily worries, it is really exciting to hear the positivity. You can find us all at novastarventures.com, and I'm on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Everyone, thank you so very much for joining us as speakers and investors today. Really appreciate your time on Partner Monday, for staying over as we did and staying up very late. Basil, we'll wrap up along with Niraj. We'll wrap up so you guys can all go to bed. But to your audience, thank you very much for tuning in today. As you heard, so many different opinions and thoughts, both of excitement and of concern, along with opportunity. Each and every one of our investors are online and available to talk to you and willing to hear from you. Reach out to them on social media in all ways that they have communicated. A shout out as well to Elena and to the LA Token team for making all of this happen, both in front of the scenes and behind the scenes every day and every week here on VCTV. I'm Kyle Ellicott. We'll be back here tomorrow